We're in a moment where there's much conversation about memorials and monuments, building anew, but also whether or not some things should be taken down. And so how do you think about that question of the taking down as well as the building?
Well, at the National Trust, we say that we don't have to revere the past, but we shouldn't erase it. Mm-hmm. Personally, I think that all communities need to make decisions about whether or not they take down something that does not reflect their current moment or cultural value. When I think of New Orleans and what the mayor did there, mm-hmm. This is 5 years after Katrina and the trauma they experienced. Mm-hmm. And then you think about the trauma that was being created through those memorials and that representation, mm-hmm. That seemed right for that city. But then when I contrast that with Richmond, Virginia, mm-hmm. the former capital of the Confederacy, mm-hmm. you have an archaeological site of massive scale called Shockoe Bottom. Yeah. There's a grassroots effort in that city to memorialize and to link together economic development, interpretation, and preservation to be able to bring life to this, but most importantly, to preserve the origin story to why Confederate or Monuments Avenue even exists. Mm-hmm. So when we look at a space like Richmond and begin to preserve the full cultural landscape, mm-hmm. that for me is important and has lasting implications.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think I just have to sort of weigh in on this idea, because I think to disappear something that we don't agree with, something that maybe doesn't, I mean, I live in a city of nations in Los Angeles in which there's just a massive changing of populations. And so a new population comes into a community and they would want to disappear, perhaps. We've had struggles with the Korean community wanting to take away images from the African American community. Mm-hmm. But what's really significant is that there's interpretation about why these struggles occur, and that there's dialogue about these things. And there are great moments. There are great moments in which we can actually transcend the time that we're living in, and we can understand what came before us, and therefore we can have a better future. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think it's very important to keep these monuments.
Mm-hmm. Michael, were you going to add something?
I just think of that, I've been asking the question of how is design used to hide and obfuscate the true history mm-hmm. in these monuments and markers. Mm-hmm. And how design can be used as a weapon as much as it can be used as a healing device. Mm-hmm. And so much of the story of the Confederate markers, which is hidden both in their neoclassical design and language, mm-hmm. what that signals, as well as in when they were constructed. The vast majority in the turn of the century, and then again in the resistance to civil rights, is a story of active resistance and to progressive change, and a story of who funded it. So many of the Robert E. Lee statues were the same design by one foundry in Western Massachusetts. Wow. That was paid for by the Daughters of the Confederacy. Ooh. And so that, did everybody know that? So then,
I didn't know
it's
that.
amazing.
Yeah.
So group collecting, grassroots organization collecting capital, mm-hmm. and then hiring one design foundry to make the same design, and then creating political pressure locally to distribute and recreate that same exact statue everywhere across the nation is is a political act, right? It's not an act of grassroots community organizing saying we really need this memorial. It's pressure from a particular narrative construction of our nation to lie about what the history was. And so I think, but that's not revealed when you see something that looks like it's been there forever. Mm-hmm. I'm really fascinated by the way in which the design signals historic permanence, mm-hmm. when actually it's quite present in our history. And so we have to be able to decode these things. And I think spatial vocabulary is something that's missing from our dialogue. How do we decode why it is the way, why they use those materials, where that foundry was, like why they use that font Those are spatial and design questions that we're not asking. We're just saying, should it be here or not be here? Or who are the people that could have this crazy idea? Well, there was a lot of political pressure to do that.